I just docked my brand new $15 million yacht, the Silver Current, when she stormed down the pier like she owned the ocean. Clipboard. Pearls. That HOA queen energy. "Excuse me," she barked, "your yacht is too big for this marina." I laughed, thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She was dead serious, and about to start a war that would rock the entire harbor. Because what Karen didn't know was that I owned the whole marina. Collision, stick around till the end. You'll want to see how karma sails back her way. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now for more real-life HOA battles, revenge stories, and unbelievable justice that'll leave you cheering. The sun danced across the calm harbor waters like liquid glass as the Silver Current made her grand entrance. She was sleek, majestic, and worth every single dollar of the $15 million I had poured into her. 150 feet of pure craftsmanship, polished teak decks, stainless steel rails gleaming like mirrors, and an interior designed to rival five-star resorts. This wasn't just a yacht. It was a symbol of 25 years of sweat, sleepless nights, and hard-won success building coastal resorts across 3 continents. Every beam and bolt of her hull reminded me of the storms I'd survived to get here. Today was supposed to be my reward. My first day docking at the new marina I'd selected for the Silver Current's permanent home, the picturesque Harbor Point Marina, known for its glassy blue water and scenic boardwalk lined with cafes, boutiques, and seagulls gliding lazily above. As my captain carefully eased us into the berth, I stood on deck, soaking it all in, the smell of salt air, the faint sound of waves kissing the hull, and that feeling of peace you only get near the ocean. I thought to myself, this is it. The quiet life I earned. But I was wrong. Peace was the last thing I was about to find. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a woman striding down the dock toward us like she owned the ocean. Even from a distance, I could tell she wasn't coming to welcome me. She had a clipboard clutched tightly to her chest, oversized sunglasses covering half her face, and that unmistakable posture, chin raised, lips pursed, shoulders back, the posture of someone who believed rules existed to control everyone but her. Her hat was wide enough to block the sun, her pearls flashed like armor, and the expression on her face could curdle milk. She stopped just short of the gangway, looking up at the yacht with a disgusted frown, as if the sight of it personally offended her. My first mate looked at me and whispered, "Uh-oh. We've got a Karen on deck." I laughed quietly. "Every marina has one," I said. "Let's see what this one wants." The engines hummed to a gentle stop. The crew tossed the docking lines to the waiting hands on the pier. The air was calm, the gulls circled above, and I was halfway down the gangway when I heard the sharp, commanding tone that could only belong to someone who ran an HOA like a kingdom. "You can't dock that thing here," she barked before I could even greet her. I blinked, caught between amusement and disbelief. "Excuse me." She adjusted her sunglasses and glared at me as though I'd just parked a semi-truck on her front lawn. "This marina has size restrictions," she continued, flipping through her clipboard. "Nothing over 80 feet. That thing," she waved a hand dramatically toward my yacht, "is far too big." Now, normally I'm a patient man. I deal with developers, lawyers, and contractors daily, people who thrive on confrontation. But there was something about the way she said things that rubbed me the wrong way. "That thing," I said slowly, "is a registered vessel, and I've got clearance from the harbor master himself. This is slip 17A, correct?" "Yes," she snapped. "And I'm the president of the Harbor Point Marina Homeowners Association. Which means I have authority over what comes in and out of this dock." Authority. There it was. The word Karen types love most. I nodded politely. "Well, ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but the harbor master told me there was no issue." She smirked, a small satisfied curl of the lips. "The harbor master doesn't run this marina. We do. And this vessel violates multiple HOA regulations: length, crew capacity, even the color scheme." "The color scheme?" I repeated, half laughing. "Yes. The bylaws specify neutral tones only. No excessive metallics or reflective finishes that disturb the community aesthetic." I looked back at the Silver Current, her silver-white hull shining in the sunlight like a dream, and shook my head in disbelief. This woman was seriously trying to lecture me about color palettes. Behind her, a couple of older men had gathered, curious about the confrontation. One leaned to the other and whispered, "That's Karen, she runs the board." The other nodded knowingly, as if that explained everything. Karen's tone softened just a little, but her words didn't. Look, you seem like a nice man. Maybe you didn't know. But if you want to stay here, you'll need to move this yacht to a commercial dock. The residents don't want to feel overshadowed. I smiled politely, but inside, I was fighting back laughter. Overshadowed, I repeated. Is that what this is about? She crossed her arms. It's about maintaining order. Something in her expression told me she wasn't used to being questioned. People probably gave in just to avoid her wrath. But not me. I'd faced harder battles than HOA politics. Well, I said, glancing toward the harbor office, I'll double-check with management, but I think you'll find everything is perfectly legal. Her eyes narrowed. You might have money, but rules are rules. And around here, we enforce them. That line stuck with me. It had that polished arrogance only someone truly drunk on neighborhood power could pull off. I nodded, hiding a grin. Good to know. Then I turned back toward my crew, signaling them to continue docking operations. Karen huffed, turned on her heel, and stomped away down the dock, no doubt to report this incident to whatever unlucky soul had to listen to her next. As I watched her disappear around the corner, my captain stepped beside me. Sir, he said cautiously, should we be worried? I smiled. Not at all. Let her play her game. She doesn't realize she's standing on my chessboard. Because what Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't just another yacht owner renting a slip. Through a private holding company, I had purchased the entire Marina last month. And soon the woman who thought she ruled Harbor Point would find out that her kingdom already belonged to me. The next morning, I woke up early aboard the Silver Current. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, just streaks of orange and pink stretching across the calm water. Normally, that quiet moment before the marina wakes up is my favorite time of day. Coffee in hand, I like watching the reflections ripple on the surface, thinking, yeah, this is what I worked for. But that peace didn't last long. Before my coffee even cooled, I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clacking aggressively down the dock. That rhythm could only mean one thing. Karen had returned, clipboard in hand, on a mission. I watched through the window as she marched toward my yacht like a general inspecting enemy territory. This time, she wasn't alone. A younger man, nervous, holding a notebook, trailed behind her. Probably some unfortunate HOA assistant or board secretary forced to record her latest crusade. I sighed, set my mug down, and stepped out onto the deck just in time to hear her voice. There you are, she called sharply. I hope you haven't made yourself too comfortable. Morning, Karen, I said calmly, leaning against the railing. Sleep well. She ignored the pleasantry entirely. I reviewed our bylaws last night, she said, tapping her clipboard, and I'm afraid you're in violation of multiple marina regulations. I'll be issuing citations accordingly. Multiple? I asked, pretending to be genuinely curious. That's impressive. I just got here. Karen smiled, that tight, condescending kind of smile you'd expect from someone who collects fines like trophies. Yes. We have very clear standards here at Harbor Point Marina. Standards that protect the community aesthetic and property values. We can't have oversized vessels dominating the view. I couldn't help but grin. You mean like mine? She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Exactly like yours. Rule 4B states that no privately owned vessel may exceed 80 feet in length. I nodded. Interesting. The harbor master approved this slip for me personally. Her nose wrinkled, as if the mention of the harbor master somehow offended her. The harbor master oversees city logistics, she said curtly. The association manages the property. We have jurisdiction over all dock assignments, aesthetics, and noise regulations. He doesn't get to override HOA bylaws. The young man beside her scribbled notes frantically. I noticed his hand trembling slightly, probably from witnessing too many of her inspections. Karen continued, flipping to another laminated page on her clipboard. Rule 7F. No full-time crew may stay aboard overnight without prior HOA approval. Rule 9D. No parties or private events may be hosted on vessels without written consent. And Rule 10B. All vessels must maintain colors in accordance with the community's neutral palette. Neutral palette? I repeated. Yes, she said proudly, as if reciting scripture. No flashy metallics or disruptive colors that reflect light into neighboring homes. That, she said, gesturing toward the Silver Current's gleaming hull, is far too reflective. You'll need to repaint her. Repaint her. $15 million worth of craftsmanship, and she wanted me to repaint it to match her beige taste in life. I could feel my crew nearby trying not to laugh. One of them even coughed to hide a chuckle. Karen's glare shifted toward him immediately. I don't find this funny. You people think you can buy your way into this community and ignore its values. Her tone dripped with something more than arrogance. There was resentment there. Maybe envy. Karen, I said slowly, I've worked with HOAs before. I understand rules, but my yacht complies with every marina safety and zoning regulation. That may be true in your world, she shot back, but not in ours. This marina is more than just docks. It's a neighborhood, and we maintain harmony through structure and oversight. She said structure like it was her personal religion. Just then, an older man from another slip, someone clearly tired of her reign, shouted, Karen, leave the poor guy alone. The boat's beautiful. Karen turned on him like a hawk spotting prey. You're one citation away from a fine yourself, Martin. Don't test me. The poor man raised his hands and disappeared into his boat faster than a crab retreating into a shell. I had to bite back a grin. Karen turned back to me with renewed determination. I'm warning you. If you don't move this yacht within 48 hours, I'll start issuing daily penalties. I looked her straight in the eye and said, You'll do what you think you need to. I'll handle things my way. That only infuriated her more. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I replied smoothly. Just, have a good day, Karen. I turned to head back inside, but she called after me. You might have money, but you don't have authority here. We enforce the rules, not you. Those words echoed in my mind long after she stormed off down the dock, heels clacking in self-righteous rhythm. When she was gone, my captain appeared beside me, arms crossed. That woman's gonna be a problem. I smiled faintly. She already is. So what's the plan? He asked. Nothing yet, I said, gazing across the marina. The sun had risen higher now, reflecting beautifully off the Silver Current's hull, bright enough to make Karen furious from wherever she was hiding. Let her think she's in charge for a while. Sir, he said cautiously, you're not actually worried about the HOA, are you? I chuckled softly. Not at all. The thing about power is, the people who think they have it usually don't. He raised an eyebrow, realizing what I meant. You haven't told them, have you? Nope, I said with a grin. Not yet. But soon enough, Karen will find out that she's been barking at the owner of her own marina. I took another sip of coffee, enjoying the taste of irony as much as the caffeine. Because if Karen thought she could intimidate me with laminated rules and neighborhood politics, she was about to learn the truth. I didn't just rent a slip here. I owned the ocean beneath her feet. For a few blissful days after our first encounter, I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had moved on to a new victim. I spent those mornings working on my yacht, overseeing upgrades to the navigation system, repainting some deck trim, and training my crew. The Silver Current shimmered under the morning sun like liquid metal, the pride of the marina. But peace never lasts long where a Karen holds power. It started subtly, the kind of passive-aggressive sabotage that only someone with too much time and a clipboard could manage. On Monday, I received a neatly folded note taped to my boarding ramp. In bold handwriting, your yacht's night lighting violates community light pollution standards. Please remove or dim them immediately. HOA compliance. The irony was, my underwater lights were certified marina-safe LEDs, the same type approved for every other vessel docked there. The only difference was, mine illuminated the water so beautifully that people actually came by to take photos. By Wednesday, the marina's maintenance crew, clearly acting on Karen's orders, accidentally shut off my power line. The excuse? Routine inspection. When I asked when it would be restored, they shrugged and said, talk to the HOA. When I did, Karen smiled that same smug smile and said, we're just ensuring compliance with energy efficiency policies. It was like watching a cat play with a trapped mouse. The next morning, I caught her red-handed, standing at the end of my dock, snapping photos of my boat like a paparazzo. Morning, Karen, I said casually, stepping out onto the deck. New hobby. Documentation, she said crisply. We're compiling visual evidence for the board. Evidence of what? I asked. Of your nonconformity, she replied, emphasizing each syllable like a courtroom lawyer. That reflective finish violates Section 10B, as previously discussed. You were instructed to make color corrections. You want me to repaint a yacht worth $15 million because it's shiny? Her eyes narrowed. We all must sacrifice for the aesthetic integrity of the community. I raised an eyebrow. You drive a gold-plated Mercedes. That's champagne pearl, she said defensively, before pivoting on her heel and marching off. By Friday, she'd escalated. A letter arrived, certified mail, stamped with the HOA logo like it was some government decree. Inside, it listed 9 alleged violations: excessive vessel length, light pollution, reflective paint, unapproved crew lodging, improper dock decor, and even a complaint about music emanating from the deck. Music, for the record, that had been played quietly during a routine crew dinner. The letter concluded with a threat: failure to comply within 7 days will result in fines of up to $1,000 per day and possible termination of dock privileges. That last line made me laugh. Termination of dock privileges, from my own Marina. Still, I didn't react. Not yet. You don't show your hand to someone like Karen too early. Let her tighten the rope herself first. That weekend, I invited a few friends over, old colleagues from the engineering firm. We grilled fresh seafood, shared a few drinks, and told stories about past projects. And naturally, Karen showed up halfway through. Her arrival was unmistakable: the sound of heels clacking down the dock, the scent of overpowering perfume, and the rustle of papers being readied for inspection. "Excuse me," she barked, waving her clipboard. "You cannot host events on the dock without HOA approval." I turned to her calmly. "Karen, this isn't an event. It's dinner." She looked around at the 6 of us, plates in hand, soft jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker. "This is clearly an unauthorized gathering." One of my friends muttered, "She's unbelievable." Karen glared at him. "I'll be filing separate complaints for noise disturbance, fire hazard, and obstruction of dock traffic." Dock traffic, I repeated, looking down the completely empty walkway. "Yes," she said firmly. "Emergency services must have unobstructed access." I smiled and gestured down the path. "Karen, there's no one within 50 yards. "Not the point," she snapped. "You're setting a precedent. Next thing you know, people will start thinking they can just enjoy themselves here without approval." That line actually made everyone laugh, which of course, only made her angrier. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard and stormed off, muttering something about formal action and community decency. Later that night, I sat alone on the deck, listening to the soft hum of the harbor. The reflection of the marina lights rippled in the water, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. People like Karen thrive on control because deep down, they're terrified of losing it. The HOA was her empire, a tiny world where she could dictate color palettes and light bulb wattages, and everyone else had to fall in line. But me? I was the wrong kind of person for her to try that with. By Sunday, things took an even stranger turn. My Marina Gate access card suddenly stopped working. When I called the security booth, the guard said, "Sorry sir, your access has been temporarily suspended due to HOA notice." I actually laughed out loud. "Tell Karen that's adorable," I said, and hung up. I simply walked around the gate, unlocked the maintenance door with my master key, and stepped inside. The guard stared, confused. "Sir, you can't." "I can," I said, smiling. "I own the locks you're guarding." They exchanged glances. I didn't blame them, they were just doing their jobs. The next morning, Karen's voice came shrieking down the dock again. "How did you get in?" she demanded, storming toward me. "Front door," I said casually, sipping my coffee. "I revoked your access." I tilted my head. "You tried." Her face flushed red. "You think this is a game? I have authority here." "Karen," I said evenly, "you might want to double-check your paperwork before you push too far." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said, setting my coffee down. "I'm warning you, there's a difference." She huffed, spun on her heel, and stomped off. I watched her go, shaking my head. The petty war she'd started was only heating up, and she didn't even realize she'd picked a fight with the one person who could end her reign with a single signature. Because next week, I was planning to make an announcement, one that would rock the entire HOA to its foundations. Karen thought she was enforcing the rules. But soon she'd learn the truth. She was standing on my dock. By the following week, the petty complaints had turned into full-blown warfare. Every morning I'd find a new note stuck to my gangway, one about visual disruption, another about inappropriate reflection off the hull. It was almost impressive how creative Karen had become. But that Monday morning, she went nuclear. The threat a courier delivered a thick envelope stamped Harbor Point HOA, urgent enforcement action. Inside were 3 pages of legal-sounding nonsense. The final line made me laugh out loud. Due to continued non-compliance, the Harbor Point Homeowners Association hereby authorizes the removal of the vessel known as the Silver Current from slip B12 within 72 hours. Removed. As if they were talking about a misplaced canoe. I looked out at the marina, still calm and silver in the morning light. The yacht was enormous, 150 feet of steel, glass, and engineering perfection. It wasn't something you just remove. Still, I knew Karen wasn't bluffing. Somewhere, she was already on the phone, rallying her committee like generals planning an invasion. Karen's emergency meeting, sure enough, that evening the HOA held an emergency meeting at the Marina clubhouse. Through the open windows, I could hear her voice echoing across the docks. "This yacht violates every aesthetic principle we stand for," she declared. "It's bigger than any other vessel here, it blinds residents with its shine, and it's attracting outsiders." Someone timidly asked, "Isn't it legal to dock there if the city approved it?" Karen slammed her binder. "Legal doesn't mean appropriate. We have standards." Applause followed, from her loyal followers who probably feared being fined next. I decided to walk in. When I stepped through the door, the room went silent. Karen froze mid-speech, her mouth hanging open. "Evening, neighbors," I said, calm as ever. "I heard you were discussing my boat. Thought I'd attend." Karen's smile returned, thin, brittle. "Mr. Bennett, this is a private HOA meeting. Open to members, right?" I replied, taking a seat. "I own property here. I'm a member." Murmurs rippled through the room. Technically, every slip owner was an HOA member. Karen clearly hadn't expected that. She cleared her throat. "We were merely reviewing options regarding your vessel's removal." "Removal," I repeated. "You plan to tow a 150-foot yacht out of a private marina?" Her assistant piped up nervously. "Well, we, contracted a local towing company for smaller boats," I smiled. "They'll need a bigger rope." Laughter erupted from a few neighbors. Karen's glare silenced them instantly. The call to arms 2 days later, the towing company arrived. 3 trucks idling by the dock, a confused crew staring at my yacht as though they'd been asked to move a skyscraper. The foreman walked up, hat in hand. "Sir, HOA told us to relocate your vessel." "Did they?" I asked. "Do you have a city removal order?" He scratched his head. "No, just this letter." He handed me Karen's authorization, typed on HOA stationery. I smiled. "That's not legally binding. And this marina," I paused for effect, "isn't actually HOA property." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "the HOA leases docking rights from the Marina company. And I own that company." His jaw dropped. "You're the owner?" "The one and only," I said, showing him the paperwork on my tablet. "Deed, corporate license, ownership certificates, everything. If you touch that yacht, you'll be trespassing on my property." He nodded quickly and turned to his crew. "Pack it up, boys. We're not touching this." From across the pier, Karen shrieked, "What are you doing?" "Remove it." The foreman shouted back, "Ma'am, we're not getting sued today." Then he drove off, engines roaring. Karen stood on the dock, fuming, red-faced and trembling. "This isn't over," she screamed. "Oh, I hope not," I called back cheerfully. "I'm just getting started." The power play that afternoon, I called an all-staff meeting with my Marina employees, dock hands, security, and maintenance. Most of them already suspected I was more than just another boat owner, but now it was official. Effective immediately, I told them, all HOA interference with marina operations is suspended pending legal review. If anyone from their board tries to issue orders, you direct them to me. The staff applauded. One of them muttered, "Finally." Within hours, word spread through the Marina community like wildfire. Karen's not in charge anymore. Karen's meltdown the next day, I found her standing at the gate, arguing with the security guard. "You can't revoke my authority," she yelled. The guard pointed at the updated notice posted beside him. Property of Silver Current Marina Holdings, LLC. All operational authority transferred to ownership management. HOA access by permission only. Karen's voice cracked. "This is my community." I walked up behind her. "It's your neighborhood, Karen. But this," I gestured to the docks, the yachts, the shimmering water, "this is my business." She turned, eyes blazing. "You think money makes you untouchable?" "No," I said softly. "Competence does." For a second, she didn't have a comeback. Her empire of fines and rules was crumbling right under her heels. The retaliation plan, but if I'd learned one thing, it's that a Karen never goes quietly. The very next morning, she filed formal complaints with the City Harbor Board, claiming my yacht violated environmental reflection codes and public view restrictions. She even tried to contact local news, pitching a story about an arrogant millionaire polluting community harmony. The Harbor Board called me to verify. When I sent over the real ownership papers and permits, their director laughed. "She's filed 6 complaints in the past year. All nonsense." "Make it 7, I said. "And don't worry, I'll handle her." The calm before the real storm that evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I stood on deck watching Karen pace the dock, phone pressed to her ear, whisper shouting to whoever would listen. The reflection of the Silver Current danced across the water, shining brighter than ever. My captain joined me. "She's not done." "Oh, I know," I said. "She's got one more move left." He looked at me curiously. "You really think she'll try again after this?" "She'll try something desperate," I said, smiling faintly. "Because people like Karen don't know how to lose, they only know how to self-destruct." He nodded slowly. "What do we do?" I took a deep breath, the salty air filling my lungs. "We wait. The next step's hers. And when she takes it," I looked out at the horizon where the waves shimmered like silver flames. "That's when I'll end this game for good." For a few days after her towing humiliation, the marina felt almost peaceful again. The seagulls squawked lazily above the docks, fishermen swapped morning stories, and the Silver Current shimmered in the sunlight like nothing had ever happened. But calm never lasts long when Karen's pride is wounded. The setup, I first noticed something off when my dock manager, Tony, walked up with a strange look on his face. "Boss," he said, scratching his neck, "we've got inspectors here." "Inspectors?" He nodded toward the boardwalk. 3 men in orange vests were setting up cones near my slip, measuring the waterline like they were surveying a construction site. Karen stood right behind them, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. I sighed. "Here we go." As I approached, she straightened up like a prosecutor ready to present her final argument. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said sweetly, too sweetly. "We're conducting an environmental safety inspection. There have been concerns about fuel leaks from your vessel." I blinked. "Fuel leaks? That yacht's engines are cleaner than a hospital floor." "That's for them to determine," she said smugly, motioning toward the inspectors. "The HNA takes community safety very seriously." I glanced at the lead inspector's badge, City Maritime Division. Real officials. Somehow, Karen had convinced them to show up. The inspection game, the men checked the water, ran their sensors, and looked puzzled the entire time. After 15 minutes, the lead inspector approached me. "Sir, readings are clean. No contamination detected. Whoever filed the complaint might have misunderstood something." I smiled politely. "I can guess who filed it." Karen's fake smile faltered. "You must be mistaken." The inspector handed me a copy of the report. No violation found. Karen's jaw clenched as the officials packed up. Before leaving, one whispered to me, "She's persistent. We've been out here twice this month for her complaints." I just nodded. Persistent was one word for it. Obsessive was better. The fake emergency the very next night, around midnight, my phone buzzed with an emergency call. "Sir." Tony shouted through the receiver. "Fire alarm on the dock." The HOA called the fire department, said your yacht's engines are smoking. I threw on a shirt and rushed outside. When I arrived, 2 fire trucks were already parked by the gate, lights flashing red across the water. Firefighters sprinted down the pier, dragging hoses toward the Silver Current. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, looking like she'd just saved the world. "There!" she yelled dramatically. "That yacht's on fire." I saw the smoke myself. I followed her pointing finger. The only smoke was faint mist from the air conditioning vents. The fire captain looked at me, then back at her. "Ma'am, this isn't smoke, it's condensation." Karen's face turned scarlet. Well, it looked dangerous. "False alarms waste city resources," the captain warned. "You could be fined for this." Karen sputtered. I was acting in good faith. He sighed, packed up his crew, and left. The red lights faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of waves, and Karen's seething fury. I didn't even have to say anything. The look on her face said it all. She'd embarrassed herself publicly, again. The sabotage attempt by morning, I thought maybe she'd give up. But instead, she got desperate. At dawn, Tony called me again. "You're gonna want to see this, boss." When I arrived, my yacht's water intake valves were clogged, intentionally. Someone had jammed small rubber plugs deep into the filters. The security cameras told the rest of the story, a figure in a wide sun hat sneaking down the dock just after midnight. Karen. She'd actually tried to sabotage a vessel, a felony if proven. The trap, I didn't confront her right away. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I set a little trap. That evening, I had my tech team install motion-triggered lights and cameras all around my slip, hidden in the dock rails and under the gangway. Then I placed a bright maintenance notice sign on the hull, pretending to repair a non-existent leak. If she couldn't stand the sight of my yacht before, that sign would drive her mad. Sure enough, 2 nights later, the cameras caught her again. She crept down the dock in slippers and pajamas, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, muttering to herself. "This eyesore's ruining the marina, someone has to do something." She reached the gangway, grabbed the maintenance sign, and ripped it down. The instant she did, the motion lights blasted on like a stadium. The cameras zoomed. Karen froze mid-rip, eyes wide as saucers. Then she bolted down the dock, tripping over her own sandals. The confrontation the next morning, I walked up to her house. She answered the door looking disheveled, still in her robe. "Morning," I said cheerfully, holding up my tablet. I hit play. There she was, full color, 4K footage of her vandalizing the sign and trespassing on private property. Her mouth opened, then closed again. That's not me." "Sure looks like you," I said. "And considering the last sabotage attempt, this one might interest the police." "You wouldn't," she gasped. "I don't have to," I replied calmly. "All I'd need to do is show this to the Marina board and the city attorney. But I'm giving you one last chance to stop." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stared at me, hands trembling slightly, trying to hold onto whatever dignity she had left. "You think you've won," she hissed finally. "But I have friends on the board." "Great," I said with a grin. "Invite them all. I'm hosting a meeting next week. We'll settle ownership matters officially." The breaking point that meeting, the one I'd been planning since the beginning, was my endgame. The moment to reveal who really ran Harbor Point Marina. Karen, however, couldn't wait that long. Later that day, she gathered her little circle of loyal HOA board members and began drafting a petition to demand my expulsion from the community. Except this time, people weren't following her. Word had spread. Residents were tired of her tantrums, her fines, her threats. The sabotage attempt rumor had circulated fast, and everyone knew she'd gone too far. By sunset, her own supporters started avoiding her. One even sent me a message privately, about time someone stood up to her. "Whatever happens, you've got the community's support." I smiled when I read it. Because the next chapter wouldn't just end the feud, it would rewrite who truly held power here. As the marina lights flickered on that evening, the Silver Current gleamed brighter than ever, untouchable, unmovable, and perfectly calm. Karen had thrown everything she had at me: inspectors, fake emergencies, sabotage, and failed. But something told me she still had one last desperate card to play. And when she did, I'd be ready to sink her game once and for all. The morning of the board meeting felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Word had traveled fast, homeowners texting one another, dockhands whispering behind sunglasses, and even the cafe owner placing extra chairs outside for people who wanted a front row seat. I arrived early, jacket casual, sunglasses on, carrying only a slim tablet and a calm smile. My crew lined the dock in respectful distance, hands folded, ready for whatever came next. Inside the clubhouse, there was tension you could taste. The long wooden table where the HOA usually dealt with small petty issues, broken lights, a barking dog, a rogue laundry line, was now a battleground. On one side sat Karen and her inner circle, the vice president with a perpetual scowl, the treasurer who'd always looked uncomfortable with his own handwriting, and a few loyal residents who clung to her rules like lifebuoys. On the other side, in folding chairs gathered hastily, were homeowners who'd quietly suffered under Karen's fines, and a handful of new faces who'd come because they'd heard the drama and wanted justice. Karen looked like she'd slept on a pile of her own grievances. Her eyes were red-rimmed, jaw set, and she held her clipboard like a shield. When I entered, conversations died mid-sentence. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "This meeting is called to order." Her voice wobbled a bit, not a good sign for her. I sat down at the opposite end of the table, opened my tablet quietly, and let the room settle. "Thank you for allowing me to present," I said. "There are some facts I'd like everyone to review before we proceed." I tapped the screen, and without theatrics, the first image appeared on the wall-mounted monitor, the deed transfer, my company's name in crisp, legal font, the document showing I owned the Marina property. A murmur rippled through the room. Heads turned. Karen's knuckles whitened on her clipboard. She opened her mouth, but I continued, calm and direct. "This Marina operates under a lease agreement with the HOA. The association manages community policies, but the property itself is privately owned and maintained by management. I purchased the property through proper channels last month." There was silence heavy enough to hear the air conditioning kick on. A homeowner near the window cleared his throat. "So you own the Marina?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said simply. "I own the company that owns the Marina. That means any enforcement action that could disrupt operations needs to be coordinated with management, with me." I let that sink in. Some people nodded, others looked stunned. Karen's face contorted from shock to outrage in a half-second. She stood abruptly. "This is impossible," she spat. "You can't just buy our community and shut down our HOA self-governance. We have bylaws. We have the right to protect our neighborhood character." I leaned forward. "You're absolutely right about bylaws. They're important. But they don't supersede property ownership and contractual law. You cannot issue unilateral orders that affect operations without due process. In practical terms, that towing order, the fines, the attempted removal, those were not authorized by management." I tapped the monitor again, and the CCTV clip played, Karen sneaking down the dock at night, swiping the maintenance sign, stumbling in slippers, crystal clear, time-stamped evidence. A collective intake of breath swept the room. Even Karen's allies shifted uncomfortably. The treasurer looked as if he'd swallowed cold seawater. "You staged all of this," someone muttered. "She hired inspectors, called emergency services." The homeowner's voice rose. "You put our safety resources at risk." Heads turned toward Karen. For the first time, she didn't have a ready comeback. She tried to recover, voice high and quick. "We were protecting the community from," her argument collapsed under its own weight. People were no longer willing to accept nebulous protection as an excuse for harassment. Then I did something I'd planned all along. I handed the floor to the residents. "If anyone here feels they've been unfairly fined or bullied, please speak now," I said. One by one, homeowners rose. A woman with a stroller recounted how Karen fined her for a garden gnome that violated community aesthetics. A retired couple spoke about fines for a boat cover slightly off color. A young family described being threatened for hanging a child's birthday banner without prior approval. The stories poured out, each one a small nail in the coffin of Karen's credibility. When it came time for Karen to respond, the room felt like a jury box. "I was enforcing standards," she repeated, quieter now. "I had to keep things orderly." But the order she'd imposed had cost neighbors money, time, and peace. Then the local city attorney, who'd been quietly invited to attend after seeing the complaints and the CCTV evidence, spoke. He explained the legal boundaries between an HOA's governance and property owner rights. He used words like overreach, misrepresentation, and potential liability for willful misconduct. When he finished, he looked directly at Karen. These actions expose the HOA and certain individuals to civil liability, he said plainly. You should consult counsel. Karen's face drained of color. She clutched the clipboard as if it were a life preserver. Finally, I proposed a resolution. Karen would step down from the board pending a formal investigation into misuse of HOA authority. Any unfounded fines issued would be rescinded and refunded, and we would form a new committee to review and modernize the bylaws, with community input, not unilateral edicts. I also proposed that we institute a transparent complaint handling process, including evidence submission and third-party verification for any action that would affect members' property rights. The room erupted into supportive nods, some claps. A few people even stood to give a round of applause. Karen sputtered, furious and defeated all at once. You can't do this, she screamed. This is my community. You were never alone in running it, I replied. The community runs it. And this is a community meeting. My voice was calm, but firm. There was no theatrics, no gloating, just measured authority. The point had been made. By late afternoon, the board had voted on a temporary suspension for Karen pending investigation. The motion passed overwhelmingly. She left the clubhouse under a gray sky, clutching her clipboard, sputtering about lawsuits. But nobody followed her. People were tired of living under threats and fines. They wanted fairness. Outside, as I stood on the dock watching her drive away, Tony came up beside me and said, "You handled that well, boss." I didn't feel like celebrating, though. This was more than a personal victory. It was a reset for the whole Marina community. We'd reclaimed the docks from petty tyranny. That night, as lanterns shimmered over the water and the silver current rocked gently at her berth, the clubhouse hummed with quiet conversations about new bylaws, insurance policies, and better communication channels. The tide had turned. Karen had lost the first real battle, but people like her rarely disappear completely. The showdown had exposed her for who she was, and the community had found its voice. For now, that was enough. You'd think after being humiliated in front of the entire Marina board, Karen would have backed down, but people like her don't retreat quietly. They reload. For about 2 weeks after the meeting, things seemed calm. Too calm. The air around Harbor Point felt lighter, neighbors smiled more, dockhands laughed without glancing over their shoulders, and the fourth inspection happened on a Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee on the upper deck when I saw a familiar car pull up, that white Lexus SUV with the eye-sparkling heart my HOA bumper sticker. Karen stepped out in full sun hat and pearls, holding a stack of papers thicker than a novel. Behind her were 2 men in windbreakers marked Environmental Quality Division. She'd actually convinced the city to check for illegal fuel disposal from my yacht. Tony, my head deckhand, leaned over the railing. "Boss, we got company. And they don't look friendly." "I see them," I said, setting my mug down. "Let's play it cool." Karen strutted down the dock like she owned the tide itself. "Good morning," she said in that sugary voice that always preceded chaos. "We're here for a quick inspection. Nothing personal, just keeping the marina safe." The 2 officers looked uncomfortable, already realizing this wasn't a normal situation. "Good morning," I greeted, polite but firm. "Can I see your authorization?" One of them handed me a clipboard. The inspection request had been submitted by Resident Complaint, Anonymous. Of course. But in the notes section, I caught her handwriting. Neat, looping cursive. I'd seen it on dozens of HOA letters. "Let me guess," I said, meeting her gaze. "Anonymous, huh?" Karen's smile twitched. "We just can't be too careful with these oversized vessels. They tend to leak oil, overload circuits, pollute. The silver current has a triple filtration waste system," I said evenly. "Zero discharge. I helped design the tech." That got a blink from one of the inspectors. "You designed it?" "I built coastal resorts for 25 years, I replied. "The system on this yacht is cleaner than half the city's storm drains." Tony chuckled. "And we have all the maintenance logs, sir." The officers exchanged glances, took a brief look around, and within minutes, confirmed what I already knew: everything was spotless. One even complimented the setup. "Looks like a false report," the lead inspector said as he packed up his clipboard. "We'll make a note of that in the file." Karen's smile faltered. "Wait, you're not going to?" "No violations," the inspector said flatly. "Thank you for your cooperation." They walked off. Karen stayed frozen on the dock, her face twitching between disbelief and fury. That afternoon, I made some calls. Turns out Karen had filed 5 separate complaints across 3 departments: environmental, zoning, and harbor management. She was trying to create a paper trail to prove my yacht was a hazard. But every report came back clean. When the city finally flagged her name for repeated false filings, things got interesting. A few days later, she got a visit from the same city attorney who'd spoken at the board meeting. Witnesses said he showed up at her waterfront condo with a stack of documents, a formal warning for filing fraudulent reports and harassment of a property owner. Karen, apparently, tried to talk her way out of it. "I'm protecting my community," she shouted, loud enough for half the dock to hear. The attorney just told her, "Ma'am, your community protection has crossed into civil harassment territory." Word spread fast. By evening, everyone knew Karen had been served. That night, I sat on the deck watching the sunset, the golden reflection stretching across the water. The marina was quiet, except for the sound of halyards clinking softly against masts. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Until I saw movement at the far end of the dock. Karen. She was walking fast, clutching something under her arm, a plastic fuel can. My stomach dropped. "Tony!" I shouted. He was below deck, but he came running. "Camera 4, check it now." We watched through the CCTV feed as Karen crouched beside a piling near the Silver Current stern, looking around nervously. Then she set down the can, pulled out a funnel, and started unscrewing a maintenance valve, one that connected to the auxiliary fuel line. "She's out of her mind," Tony muttered. I didn't wait. I ran down the dock, every footstep echoing on the planks. "Karen! Don't you touch that!" I yelled. She froze, eyes wide, caught mid-act. For a split second, she looked like a child caught stealing candy. Then she dropped the can, sloshing fuel onto the wood. I was checking for leaks," she stammered. "With gasoline?" I barked. "You could have blown up half the marina." Security arrived seconds later, followed by the dockmaster. They immediately isolated the area, and the smell of fuel hung heavy in the air. Karen's excuses fell apart fast. When the police came, she tried to play the victim again, claiming I'd framed her. But the CCTV footage told the truth: she'd been caught red-handed. The officers took her statement, then escorted her off the property as the crowd of boat owners watched in stunned silence. For a woman who'd spent years wielding authority like a weapon, the sight was poetic, pearls glinting in the flashing red lights as she was led away from the very marina she'd once ruled. That night, I stood on the deck of the Silver Current, the fuel spill already cleaned up, and looked out over the dark water. The moon shimmered across the bay, and I realized something important. People like Karen don't hate rules, they hate losing control. And when they can't control you, they'll try to destroy what you love. But this time, she'd gone too far. The final reckoning was coming. It took only 3 days after the fuel incident for the entire marina, and most of the town, to know what Karen had done. Word travels fast on the waterfront, especially when you're the self-appointed queen of the HOA who's suddenly caught red-handed with a gas can near someone's $15 million yacht. The footage was undeniable. High definition, time-stamped, crystal clear. It showed her sneaking around in the shadows, fumbling with the cap, and spilling fuel near my vessel's maintenance line. The police had reviewed it within hours, and the district attorney didn't take long to classify it as what it was: attempted vandalism and reckless endangerment. The marina that once trembled at her clipboard now buzzed with outrage. Homeowners, sailors, and even nearby business owners were furious. She hadn't just targeted me, she'd put everyone at risk. One spark, and the entire dock could have gone up like a fireworks show. By the time her hearing came around, Karen had gone from feared to infamous. Her white Lexus was still parked at her condo, but she wasn't strutting around the docks anymore. She walked fast, sunglasses on, pretending not to hear the whispers. When the day came, the small coastal courthouse was packed. The local news had caught wind of the story: HOA president accused of attempting to destroy yacht, and suddenly the cameras were rolling. I didn't want attention, but I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing that people like Karen couldn't bully their way through life unchecked. I took my seat quietly behind the prosecution table. Karen arrived a few minutes later, dressed in beige and pearls, her lawyer whispering urgently to her as she kept her chin high. But that superiority didn't last long. The judge entered, an older man with a sharp gaze who clearly wasn't here for HOA drama. "Let's get this over with," he said, scanning the file. "Mrs. Ellison, you've been charged with attempted property destruction, reckless endangerment, and harassment. How do you plead?" Her lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. This was a misunderstanding. My client was performing a citizen safety check after receiving concerns about a possible fuel leak." The judge raised an eyebrow. "With a gasoline can?" You could hear the snickers ripple through the courtroom. The prosecutor wasted no time. He presented the security footage, showing every second of Karen's late-night escapade, from her sneaking past the restricted area sign to spilling the fuel. The room fell silent except for the faint buzz of the monitor. When the video ended, the judge leaned back, unimpressed. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, "do you have any idea how close you came to causing a major fire? You're lucky this gentleman had cameras and quick reflexes." Karen looked like a balloon deflating. Her lawyer tried one last desperate move, claiming stress, community service, even confusion about the fuel can. But the evidence was ironclad. The judge delivered his ruling: a 2-year probation, $25,000 in restitution, and a permanent restraining order barring her from contacting or approaching me, my crew, or any Marina property again. On top of that, she was removed from the HOA board effective immediately. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. A few residents in the back even clapped before the bailiff asked for silence. Karen didn't look up. She just stared at the floor, her power, her pride, everything, crumbling around her. As we exited, the press swarmed for comments. I didn't gloat. I simply said, community rules are meant to protect people, not to control them. Let this be a reminder that authority without empathy becomes tyranny. Back at the Marina, things changed fast. The HOA board voted unanimously to dissolve and reform under a new transparent structure, one where every member had a voice. We even renamed the association Harbor Freedom Collective. The old logo with the anchor and Karen's name on every memo? Gone for good. The silver current stayed docked at her berth, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a sign that nobody was above or beneath fair treatment. I started hosting weekend barbecues on deck for the residents, inviting families who'd once been fined for hanging wind chimes or planting flowers too bright. The Marina came back to life. Kids ran along the docks again, fishermen joked at sunrise, and for the first time, people actually smiled when they saw the HOA office open. Tony walked up one evening as I leaned on the railing, watching the sunset ripple across the calm water. "Feels different now," he said, handing me a cold drink. "It's lighter," I agreed. "No more walking on eggshells." He grinned. "And no more surprise fuel inspections, either." We laughed, the sound echoing across the bay. Weeks later, I got a certified letter, this time from the city. They wanted to partner with my company to redesign and modernize the Marina facilities using sustainable technology, the same kind Karen had mocked me for bringing in. Funny how things come full circle. I accepted, of course. And in that redevelopment plan, I made one small note: the old HOA office, the one Karen used to guard like a throne, would be converted into a community lounge and open co-working space. No more clipboards, no more arbitrary fines. Just neighbors, sharing coffee and conversation. When construction began, I stood on the dock and looked out at the silver current, her silver hull gleaming under the morning light. This marina had started as just another investment, another property on my list. But now, it felt like home. Karen, from what I heard, sold her condo quietly and moved inland. Some say she tried to join another HOA, and was politely declined once her name came up in the background check. On my final evening before sailing out for the season, I took one last walk through Harbor Point. The docks were peaceful, the sea calm, the air filled with laughter and the faint hum of engines. As I stepped onto the deck of my yacht, I turned back toward the shoreline and smiled. Karen's reign was over. The Marina was free. And as the silver current cut through the waves, gliding into the open horizon, I thought about how poetic it all was, that the woman who tried to sink me had only ended up sinking herself. Fishing pole moral of the story: When power turns into obsession, it only destroys the person holding it.